My top three Irish films. At number one, I'd have to go for Jim Sheridan's My Left Foot. It was a groundbreaking film with incredible performances by Daniel Day-Lewis and Brenda Fricker and all the rest of the cast. And it was Jim Sheridan's debut film. Jim has now went on to be our greatest ever filmmaker, in my opinion, and it's a film I always go back to. I just think it's a masterpiece. Number two, I would have to go with The Wind That Shakes the Barley, although directed by an Englishman, Ken Loach, and written by a Scottish man of Irish heritage, Paul Laverty. Probably the greatest screenwriting directing duo in the history of cinema. And about two brothers who were fighting in different sides in the Civil War. And I just think it was just an incredible film. The way it's made, that sort of social realist style, and it has an unbelievable Irish cast in it, and showed the truth and didn't pull no punches. And actually, I don't think most Irish filmmakers, if they got a hold of that, they wouldn't have done it even in that way. They would have been more fair or balanced, as they like to say, which I don't think there's any fairness or balance in colonisation. And Ken Loach's film showed that. So The Wind That Shakes the Barley at number two. And then number three, I would go for The Quiet Man, which is directed by John Ford, an Irish-American, starring John Wayne, Victor McLagan, Maureen O'Hara, a brilliant Irish cast. Big kind of hokey-pokey Irish back then, but that's kind of the way it was. I think the film had a real cadence about it, beautiful cinematography, and a kind of look into old kind of Ireland a bit, and the kind of romantic side had a beautiful score, and it's just one of those films I keep going back to, and it's a big kind of family favourite in my family. So The Quiet Man at number three, and that's my top three Irish films. I hope you enjoy them.
Hi, I'm Nick Kelly. I'm the writer and director of The Drummer and the Keeper. I've been asked to choose my own three favourite Irish films of all time, which is a really hard thing to do because I like lots of Irish films. But as of today, the three I'm going to go for in no particular order are The Last of the High Kings, which is a really quite obscure film from the 1990s made by Dave Keating. And it's a brilliant premise and it's brilliantly realised. It's the story of a summer that this young guy spends between him sitting his leaving certificate, which is his final kind of state exam that you leave the school system with, and him getting the results from the leaving certificate. And it's all about music and girls and growing up. It's a fantastic film. I also want to choose The Crying Game. Again, it's a 1990s film. Neil Jordan won an Oscar for Best Screenplay. I don't want to say too much about the film because it's a really brilliant genre twist film, and a fantastic central performance by Stephen Ray. And the third film I'd like to recommend is a very recent one. It's called Extraordinary. It's by two guys who've done lots of commercials as Daddy, but this is their debut feature. And it's the story of a driving instructor played brilliantly by Maeve Higgins, who unfortunately is plagued with the ability to speak to ghosts. So it's kind of a comedy ghost story. It's totally brilliant. So go watch them.
Hi, I'm Seán Murray. I'm the writer and director of Unquiet Graves, a film that we had screened at the Irish Film Festival last year. So my three Irish top films, I'll go with three documentaries that have mostly inspired me. Number one will have to be Mise Éire by the iconic filmmaker George Morrison, who is, I think, as it stands at the minute, is 95 years of age. The film is about the period leading up to and after the 1916 Easter Rising. And what's interesting about the film is that George Morrison himself went to the then Taoiseach, Eamon de Valera, who himself took part in the insurrection in 1916. and asked him for funds to salvage whatever archive that there was around this period, and came up with the iconic documentary Mise Éire, and then following that another documentary called Saoirse. But Mise Éire for me would have to be my most influential and my favourite Irish film of all time. Number 2 would be an underground film, and I say underground in the sense that it's a film that was banned as well. Mise Éire was banned in my home city in Belfast in 1959. Arthur McCaig is an interesting documentarian. He was from New Jersey. He lived in Paris, and he made political documentaries about the conflict in the north of Ireland through the Troubles. And in 1988, he made Irish Ways, which was, for the first time for me as a child, I had seen marginalised voices from within my own community who had been heavily censored during the conflict speak about their own communities. And I think he was a filmmaker ahead of his time. He, in that same documentary, heard voices from the loyalist side, the Protestant side, from combatants on that side. We'd also heard voices from the RUC, the police force, and of course the British Army. So he was a filmmaker who was well ahead of his time. We would never have seen that in any conventional documentary at the time. We're only starting to see that now, where we have many voices in a number of post-conflict documentaries. So Arthur McCaig, for me, was the most influential filmmaker in that sense. Number 3, interestingly enough, would be a film called The Image You Missed, which was made by Arthur McCaig's son. Arthur's now dead. His son made The Image You Missed and was released, I think, 2018, which was about his fractured relationship with his father. Donald never really knew his father. And it's a film essay that looks about his relationship, and the relationship he had was through the conflict images of the Troubles. And for me, it's just an amazing documentary, and he's one to look out for. Donald Foreman is an exceptional documentarian and filmmaker. So that's it for me, folks. And if you can get your hands on any of those films, enjoy them.